Let's apply this to 5 factorial. That's going to be equal to 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Let's work this out mentally. It's not that hard to do. 5 times 4, of course, is 20. 20 times 3 is 60. 60 times 2 is 120. 120 times 1 is going to be 120. So the answer to this one is D, 120. Solve this arithmetic using practice test question. It says if a stereo costs $125 and went on sale for a 20% discount, what is its sale price? So sales price is always going to be the original price minus the discount amount times the original price. Original price we know is $125.
Hello.
The food downstairs, you want to eat now?
Yeah, I'll be down there.
Okay, you do? Okay, cool. All right. Do you like boiled corn?
Yeah, that's fine.
I had to boil corn from them. I got coleslaw and boiled corn.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine? Okay, then. All right. Food, it's hot still. Lord of Jesus. It's still hot.
Sure enough.
Mm-hmm. Salt milk. Maybe. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I did. No, they're not your sheets. Mom, you gonna eat now?
Put some light on here, please.
Yeah, that's like that.
Please put some light.
I know.
Oh, no.
And we gotta go by Nato tonight. Then shall they get that strawberry?
But the discount amount today is 20%, which is the same thing as 0.2 before, which is the same thing.
I get for 50 minutes.
Well, I know 125 divided by 5 is 25, so I'm actually going to use the fraction equivalent here. 1/5 times 125. Let's work this out. This becomes 125 minus 1/5 times 125.
Oh, no, you don't take me on your dirt.
125 minus 25 is going to be 100.
You ain't been, you been dirt there about 3 months.
This stereo.
You going there, don't stop. We're gonna stop by Nato too. Oh, yeah.
I'm going home.
No,
y'all take me home, man.
yeah. You got ready to bed? You got a new shirt on?
I ain't talking about no new shirt. No.
Solve this arithmetic.
You always got some up your sleeve here.
$20% discount. What is its sale price?
I told Gary how.
Sales price is always going to be the original price minus the discount.
Okay.
The discount amount we know is 20%, which is the same thing as 0.2 in decimal form, which is the same thing as the fraction 1/5. Well, I know 125 divided by 5 is 25, so I'm actually going to use here 1/5 times 125. Let's work this out.
He's coming down. Okay, that's a minute, dude. Dad, when you turn the light on?
This becomes 125 minus 125. That's 125 divided by 5, which is 25. 125 minus 25 is going to be 100. So the sales price of this stereo is $100. You could have used the decimal point 2 here and worked that out using decimal multiplication, but that would slow you down a little bit. Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode.
23% of recent graduates fail the ASVAB, but by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to pass it in 2026 so that you can pursue your military dreams. First off, what is the ASVAB? It stands for the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, and it is essentially the test that tells you whether or not you can join the military based on your intelligence levels. And it is a percentile test, not a percentage test, meaning it's not like in school where an 80 is gravy, or a C gets a degree or D gets a degree or whatever. It is a percentile test, meaning if 100 people take it, in theory, somebody's going to get a 1, somebody's going to get a 99, and somebody will fall in everywhere in between. So they do it as percentile. When you get a 31, it doesn't mean you missed every single question and you're an idiot. It means you're in the 31% out of 100 in the country. However, that is based solely on math and English, which means it's not an accurate depiction on your intelligence, so don't beat it up. It is specifically geared towards math, English, and what the military considers their requirements to join. Now, that's the basic educational piece, but the main brunt of the ASVAB is actually the aptitude portion, which helps you determine what jobs and occupational skills you will best be served to learn, i.e., it'll break down into categories like mechanical and electrical, which we'll dig into in this video, which says, hey, this guy might be really well suited to learn electrical stuff or mechanical stuff or whatever that is. And so it'll help you determine what career fields you'll have the highest likelihood of success in so that you know what job fields to apply for in the military. Now, a lot of different branches of the military look at different categories in this, but the main ones are your GT, which is your general technical, your mechanical, your electrical, and your clerical. So like, can you be admin job, electrical, mechanical job, or like GT is just kind of an overarching, how well do you learn new things with your hands and stuff. This one test is in fact the educational gate between you and all of the military benefits in your future in a career in service. Okay, now we're going to break this down. Your AFQT score, which is your Armed Forces Qualifying Test score,
Go to 38. And there was no cheating. Let's go to 38. Yeah. I can't hear nothing. Oh.
You fail the ASVAB. That's your first take. Another month later, you can take it a second time. 3, take it without going out of your way or taking any additional time out of your life. Comprehension. And again, the minimum for all branches is 31. If you pass that threshold, you're good for the service. The Air Force tries to tell you otherwise. Probably just means you weren't somebody they wanted anyway. Again, your line scores, which is that GT, mechanical, electrical, clerical, and all those other scores that we'll break down in a minute, is actually what determines what jobs you get. Meaning, I have seen people get a 40 on the ASVAB and be qualified for every job in the military. And I've seen people get an 80 on the ASVAB and not be qualified for every job in the military. Because you might be incredibly good at math and English, get an 80, 90 on the test, and you're a dum-dum when it comes to mechanical. And you ain't gonna learn it. And therefore, your mechanical score sucks, and they're not gonna put you into a mechanical job. So the line score and the overall score, the AFQT, they don't compute. They're not the same thing. The AFQT is what matters for you actually being able to join the military, and the line scores are what matters for your jobs. There are 3 main ways that you might find yourself taking the ASVAB. The first is kind of forced to via the school system. See, while you're in high school, there's a good chance you're going to take the ASVAB. A lot of these public schools, essentially, they don't necessarily force it on you, but they offer it as an alternative to some of the other tests that you might take in your junior, senior year, which is nice because if you're thinking about the military, this gives you a spot at school to take it without going out of your way or taking any additional time out of your life. And you can take the test, and then military guys, recruiters, will see those scores, and they can call you if they think you're qualified for service, right? The second way is essentially taking it, whether at MEPS or at a reserve facility, with the recruiter. So you go into the recruiter's office, you take like a little practice test, they're like, oh my gosh, you might pass, or oh my gosh, study. And then you go take the test, and if you pass, great. If you don't, study some more. And then the third way is what we call the PICAT. And the PICAT was actually being pioneered while I was a recruiter. It's been around now for a little while. And you can actually take this at your house, or at the recruiting station, or wherever, with specialized login info and stuff to prove that it's actually you. But here's the caveat. If you take that, your score does not necessarily mean that's your score, because they know people are going to essentially cheat on this test. And so you will have to do a verification test at MEPS or with the recruiter with the ASVAB, and you have to do it's like a 20-25 minute verification that basically just says, oh yeah, this probably was his actual score, to make sure you're not lying on the PICAT. Now, for those of you who don't pass on the first go, don't worry. If you fail the ASVAB, that's your first take. Another month later, you can take it a second time. 3 months after that, you can take it a third time, and 6 months after that, you can take it a fourth time. Now, if you fail it the fourth time, sorry. So you've got to actually study, and I would encourage you to just do all the things that you would do if you were trying to learn a hobby that you wanted to learn, and don't treat this as like a chore, but actually freaking study, and you'll be just fine. Proof of that is that the Army has started sending people who didn't pass the ASVAB to like pre-boot camp ASVAB prep course to take the ASVAB, and they've had a pretty good success rate, which basically proves if you actually lock yourself away in a room and study, you can pass the dang test. Now, here is a warning though. If you take it and you pass, and you're like, I don't like my score, I'm gonna take it again, you don't keep your highest score. This is not the ACT. You keep your most recent score. So if you get a 35, you don't like it, and you decide to take it again, and you get a 30, you're no longer qualified. You got to go take it again and get above that 31 again. So if you didn't score very well, don't test fake. And if you got like an 85 and you're just that ego kid who wants to get a 90, haha, nerd, first off. And secondly, not important, because you passed. You're good. You're in the clear. The score that matters then are your line scores. What should you actually study? I kind of hit this drum a little bit, but it's math and English, right? So algebra and English. Paragraph comprehension, like reading and understanding. Here's just like an absolute overview, right? Arithmetic reasoning, which is like word problems, ratios, percentages, distance time, basic logic. Mathematics knowledge, which is fractions, decimals, simple equations, inequalities, basic geometry. Word knowledge, which is vocabulary, prefixes, suffixes, word roots. And paragraph comprehension. Main idea, tone, what is the author really saying? Now, if you listen to me say that and you're clueless about what that means, get studying, go and Google those specific words that I just told you, right? Like if you don't know what a prefix suffix is, go figure it out. There's your basic starting point. and then dig into how these work. So you should be able to understand like past, future, present tense. You should be able to understand intent of of rhetoric, of words, of what that sentence is saying. You should understand basic algebra and mathematics stuff, right? Addition, PEMDAS, right? And if you don't know what that is, go back to school. No, just study it, right? It's basic stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's easy stuff because not everybody's good at math, not everybody's good at English. I was awful at English in high school, and guess who's written a freaking published book now, right? So it doesn't matter, but the point is, study those things. Again, all of that is for the overall score to get in the military. None of that has anything to do with your line score outputs. And here's another bonus on the study piece. If you're like under the gun, you've got to pass, you just have to do this. If you're under the gun, you're hurting on time, and you've really got to make sure that you pass this ASAP, focus 90% of your effort for studying on algebra and 10% on English, because you don't necessarily know what words are going to be in. You don't necessarily, like, that part doesn't take as much generally for people to learn how to like read a sentence and how to understand words. But the math part messes a lot of people up, and you second guess it, you triple guess it, you quadruple check guess it, and you leave the damn question blank because you're a numbskull. Like, spend the majority of your time studying the algebra and the math portion, because if you understand how that stuff works, you can do the problems while you're in the test. And then if you're really worried more about the job scores, like you just know you're going to crush the Asvab, spend a little time working on mechanical and electrical stuff for an aptitude test, and that information will help you with boosting those line scores for job qualifications. A couple of core resources for studying the very first one, and I know this works because I used to give it out. We had a couple copies in the office. We would give it to people who were thinking about joining the military. Asvab for Dummies. I know, you're like, I'm not a dummy. I don't care, read the book. Use the book, study the book, actually spend an hour a day prepping with that book. Go get Asvab for Dummies and use it to study, because it has everything you need to pass the Asvab in the book in more detail than I'm going to be able to give you in one video. There's also quite a few different companies that will help you study online. Now, I'm not going to give you a specific company because I don't have any affiliate plugs. I'm not trying to make money off you guys going to study for the ASVAB, but one of the ones that I used to use was like 4Tests, like the number 4tests.com was like a freebie study guide. There are a lot of different resources out there to help you study the ASVAB. If you want to go the online course way or the online way, honestly, I would just go talk to a recruiter in your area and say, what do you recommend? Because they might have a copy of Asvab for Dummies in the office, but they're going to have resources because it's in their best interest for you to pass the Asvab. So they will give you like the best up-to-date gouge on what they see people actually using successfully. So go ask them. Now, there are practice tests. I wouldn't recommend that right off the bat, but there are some official DoD practice tests to kind of see how you're doing. So do a bunch of prep work and then go check out one of these practice tests. You can also use different apps like Quizlet. Quizlet most likely, in fact I know it does, has quite a few different options for studying for the ASVAB and is probably worth checking out. The end goal here is build reps. Build basic fundamentals so that the test feels easy. So go in there for the math fundamentals, really focus on fractions, decimals, percentages, how to convert between them, ratios and proportions, solving for x in simple equations, area, perimeter, volume of basic shapes and how to calculate them, right? Practice that stuff without a calculator, because yes, I know you can use your phone for everything, but you're going to get paper and a number 2 pencil, and that's it. So practice it without a calculator. And don't worry, nobody's going to come over your shoulder and ask you to show the work to get the answer right. If you get the answer right, nobody cares about your work, so use it or don't, but get good at doing it without a calculator. For your English fundamentals, you should practice things with your daily vocab, like really focusing on learning prefixes and roots, i.e. pre equals before, anti equals against, mal equals bad, like practice or malpractice, geo equals earth, bio equals life, circum equals around. So instead of navigate, circumnavigate, right? These are prefixes. Now you're going to want to know like the 50 to 75 common roots. These are worth 10 to 20 extra points over time, but understanding that these prefixes and suffixes make will help you in the long run on this test. For the reading side, you really just want to focus on looking for clue words like however, therefore, in summary, primarily. These are usually near the answer, and you also want to practice finding the main idea in a sentence, in a paragraph, so that you can articulate what that point was that they're trying to drive home. Okay, now if I'm you, I would look at just a 2-track way to study on this. So strength building and practice test. pick 1 to 2 weak topics, whether that's fractions, paragraph comprehension, whatever, and then go and deep dive watching explanations, reading the chapters on it. Do 10 to 20 practice questions, practice problems, focus on those 1 skills, and then review every question you miss. Rework, figure out where you went wrong. Make sure you understand the concept. So go deep on 1 or 2 pieces and then move on the next day to 1 or 2 pieces. Don't just study the blanket all across. When you feel good about it, go take a timed test on one of those sections and see how you're doing. Go take a practice test. You can do this with your recruiter's office or whatever and kind of see where you're at. But I would really focus on just going like day by day, 1 or 2 topics and going deep rather than doing across the board. If you've got 6 months, do 20 to 30 minutes a day focusing on math, English, and vocabulary. And just do that as long as you can. And then as you get a little closer, maybe you do like the specific skills on the areas that you're weak. So you're like, man, I'm really struggling on, Algebra 1, basic fundamentals of decimals. Great. Go study on decimals of Algebra 1, right? And deep dive that a couple days a week as you lead up to taking the test. If you only have like 4 to 8 weeks, then go, like an hour or 2 a day and heavy focus on your weakest areas. So just specifically work on your weakest spots. You don't want to try to, like, if you crush algebra, then focus on the English. If you crush English, focus on the algebra. You shouldn't be doing all of this focused on, like, you don't want to just work on bolstering your strengths. You want to work on the spots that are weak. Now look, if you're within 2 weeks of taking this thing and you're in emergency mode, drop everything and only work on the AFQT pieces, meaning algebra and English. And I would spend probably, if you've got 2 weeks, 10 days on algebra and 4 days on English, and I would break it into like 1 day's prefix, 1 day's suffix, 1 day's paragraph comprehension, and 1 day's just basic vocabulary stuff. Boom, there's your English. And then on the algebra side, 1 day's decimals, 1 day's percentages, 1 day's finding for X, right? Like, figure out which pieces you're weak at and give them an extra day or 2, and then do a day on each subject, and then on the last day, kind of a brief overview. A couple of study habits that'll actually help you with this. The first is get off your freaking phone. Turn it off, put it somewhere else, ignore your phone. You don't need it for any of this. You don't need it for algebra. You don't need it for calculations. Pen, paper, pencil, computer, book, whatever, but don't let the phone be a distraction. You don't need to be texting Jody or your girlfriend or whoever. Just actually focus, because this matters. Use like maybe 20 to 30 minute like focus break with like a 5-10 minute break, right? So like focus for 20-30 minutes, take 5 or 10, focus again for 20-30, take 5 or 10. You don't have to just sit down for 2 hours, you'll start going crazy. I would suggest you study at the same time.
watch this video. And what's more, I also want to encourage you to make an effort to work out the practice problems in this video on your own. That is to say, after I read a question, you should pause the video, try to answer it on your own, and then resume. Welcome YouTubers to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there's going to be 179 practice test questions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the mathematics knowledge subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the Asvab, as well as the pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test, that is the PICAT. On the actual Asvab and PICAT, you'll have 20 minutes to answer 60. Welcome YouTubers to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there's going to be 50 practice test questions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the math. Welcome YouTubers to another episode in my while. It's the distance between the number and 0 on the number. It is the same thing as -3 times. It is the same thing as -3 times -3. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so this becomes -2 times. Questions. This Asvab PICAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve for x. We have 3 plus 4 times x minus 2 equals 15. In other words, we're going to be solving this equation for x. That is, we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's get started by subtracting 3 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out over here, leaving you with 4 times x minus 2 on this side. 15 minus 3 is 12. Do we have to take this 4 and multiply it out to the x and -2? We don't have to do that. We can go ahead and divide both sides by 4 in this case. In doing so, that leaves you with x minus 2 over here. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Again, to get x by itself, we're now going to add 2 to both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x over here. 3 plus 2 is 5. So x equals 5. That said, you always want to check your work. We're going to go ahead and plug in 5 in the original equation and see if it makes a true mathematical statement. This becomes 3 plus 4 times 5 minus 2 equals 15. This says 3 plus, again, we're going to work out what's in parentheses first. 5 minus 2 is 3 equals 15. This is 3 plus 4 times 3 is 12 equals 15. 3 plus 12 is 15. Does 15 equal 15? It does. That's a true statement. Therefore, we know 5 is the correct solution. For the Asvab and PICAT, you will have to solve at least 4 or 5 equations, so make sure you can do this. This Asvab PICAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says simplify 4 over 5x plus 2x. Well, in order to simplify this expression, we're going to treat these terms like fractions, in that we're going to have to add them, and in order to add fractions, they have to have a common or the same denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is write 2x as a fraction by placing it over 1. To write this 2x over 1 with the denominator of 5x, I have to multiply its denominator as well as its numerator by 5x. So this becomes 4 over 5x plus, what's 1 times 5x? That's just 5x. What's 2x times 5x? Well, 2 times 5 is 10. X times x is x squared. Now that these have the same denominator, we can write our answer. Again, this 10x squared is going to come first, plus 4. So just like that, this one is 10x squared plus 4 over 5x, which is answer choice C, of course. This Asvab PICAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x equals -2 and y equals -3, then xy squared equals. So we're evaluating the expression x times y squared when x equals -2 and y equals -3. First, let's plug these values in accordingly. We know x is -2. And pay close attention. I'm going to put these in parentheses. Y is -3 squared. Let's go ahead and follow our order of operations. Again, our order of operations is remembered by PEMDAS. Parentheses first, exponents next, multiplication and division from left to right, addition and subtraction from left to right. We have an exponent right here in multiplication. -3 squared is the same thing as -3 times -3. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so this becomes -2 times +9. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative, so this is -18. This one is D. This Asvab PyCat Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x over 5 plus 6 equals -14, then x equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for x. That said, let's get started by copying this one down as if we were writing on our own scratch paper like we will be on test day. Let's start by subtracting 6 from both sides in order to get x over 5 by itself. -14 minus 6 is -20. Let's get rid of 5 from the denominator of x by multiplying this side by 5 and this side by 5. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. -20 times 5 is going to be -100. So this one is A, -100. This Asvab PyCat Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if a circle has a diameter of 45 units, how many units is its radius? So for this one, you have to understand that there is a defined relationship between the diameter and radius of a circle. That is, the diameter D is always twice as long as its radius. That is, D equals 2R, or 2 times the radius. In this case, we know our diameter is 45, and we're going to be solving for R, so divide both sides by 2, get R by itself. If you can't do 45 divided by 2 mentally, you have to do the log division. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0, but we got to drop down this 5. 2 times 2 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. Again, add a decimal and our 0 placeholder that we can drop down now. 2 times 5 is 10 with no remainder. So this one is D. Our radius is going to be 22.5 units. Solve this Asvab Math Knowledge Practice Test question in 60 seconds. It says this: what is 3a squared plus a squared added to a plus 6? You should recognize that you're being asked to combine two polynomials, notably 3a squared plus a squared and a plus 6 via addition. To do that, it looks like this: 3a squared plus a squared plus a plus 6. Now that we've created this expression, we have to simplify it by combining like terms. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power.
Answer
Here you can
B.
see we have a raised to the second power and a raised to the second power here. Therefore, we can combine these two. Again, if it's helpful, put that 1 in front of a squared. 3a squared plus 1a squared is 4a squared. Cross these out now. A doesn't have corresponding like terms. Just go ahead and bring it down as is. Likewise, 6 doesn't have corresponding like terms. Just go ahead and bring it down as is. Clearly, the answer is 4a squared plus a plus 6. Answer this Asvab Math Knowledge Practice Test question in 60 seconds. It says this: if 2 to the x power equals 32, what is x? So if you don't know this one right away, you can use some brute force to figure this one out. For instance, we could say 2 squared equals 2 times 2. Of course, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 to the third is 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. Likewise, 2 to the fourth is 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. Let's work that out. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16, so that's not it. About 2 to the fifth. 2 to the fifth is 2 multiplied by itself 5 times. That's 2 times 2, which is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16 times 2 is 32. So the correct answer to this one is D5. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PyCat says if x minus y does not equal 0, then x squared minus y squared over x minus y equals. So we're trying to simplify this expression here. I'm going to start by copying it down. We have the expression x squared minus y squared over x minus y, and we want to simplify this expression. So you have to recognize that in the numerator we have the difference of two perfect squares, and that's a special case of factoring, and it's this case. Again, the difference of two perfect squares says a squared minus b squared is going to be equal to a plus b times a minus b. So we can actually factor our numerator by following this pattern. So this is going to factor to be x plus y times x minus y. And of course, this is over x minus y. Now we can cross out corresponding values in our numerator and denominator, notably x minus y. And in doing so, that just leaves us with x plus y. So this expression simplifies to a x plus y. You did have to know this special case of factoring to solve this one. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says, if x plus y plus 15 equals 30 and x plus y equals z, then 50 minus z equals. So let's start by copying these three statements down. We're told, according to the problem, that x plus y plus 15 equals 30. Likewise, we're told that x plus y equals z. And finally, we're told we want to solve for 50 minus z. So clearly, we have to find out what z is, and the easiest way to do that is to start with this first equation. Specifically, we're going to solve it for x and y by subtracting 15 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving you x plus y on this side. 30 minus 15 is 15. All right, so we can see x plus y equals 15, and here we have x plus y equals z. Well, clearly, we know z is 15. Now that we know that z is 15, we could go ahead and plug it in here. This becomes 50 minus 15, which is 35, and so our answer is going to be 35. Now, if you couldn't do 50 minus 15 mentally, you could always do it off to the side. 50 minus 15. 0 minus 5 we can't do. We have to borrow. This becomes 4. This becomes 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 1 is 3. All right, so that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says the square root of 27 divided by 3 equals. So what is 27 divided by 3? You should know that that is 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. So this one is going to be B3. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says the absolute value of 12 minus 16 equals. So we're going to do the absolute value of 12 minus 16. 12 minus 16 is going to be negative 4. So we're trying to find the absolute value of negative 4. Well, here's the definition of absolute value if you haven't seen it in a while. It's the distance between the number and 0 on the number line. So our number in this case is negative 4. It's right here. What is the distance between negative 4 and 0 on the number line? Well, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the absolute value of negative 4 is simply positive 4. So this one is going to be C. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says, what is the prime factorization of 36? So we're going to find the prime factorization of 36 using a factor tree as well as prime numbers. Again, a number is considered prime if it's only divisible by 1 in itself. And some of the common prime numbers you need to know are 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. 1 is never considered a prime number. So in other words, using these prime numbers as well as a factor tree, we're going to find the prime factorization of 36. Now 36 is the same thing as 2 times 18. 2 times 18 is 36. 18 is 2 times 9. 9 is 3 times 3. Now let's go through this factor tree and circle all of our prime numbers. 2's prime, 2's prime, 3's prime, and 3's prime. In other words, the prime factorization of 36 is 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And we could see that that is answer choice C. And you could quickly check your work on this one. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 3 is in fact 36. So we know we did our prime factorization correctly. So this one is C. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says if A equals 3 and B equals 5, then A times B over 15 plus A times 6 plus 7 times B equals. So in other words, we're going to be evaluating this expression. So let's start by copying it down. We have A times B over 15 plus A times 6 plus 7 times B. And we want to know what this expression equals when A equals 3 and B equals 5. Now, the only thing you want to pay close attention to is the order of operations, that is PEMDAS. Remember, the order of operations tell you the order in which to work this out. You do what's in parentheses first, exponents if there are any, multiplication and division as they appear from left to right in the expression, that is to say they have equal precedence, and addition and subtraction as they appear in the expression from left to right, that is to say they have equal precedence. So let's go ahead and plug in these values respectively. This becomes 3 times 5 over 15 plus 3 times 6 plus 7 times 5. All right, so we're going to solve what's in parentheses first, but we have a plus sign separating these two different sides of this expression, so we can also work out this side at the same time. 3 times 5 is 15, so this is 15 over 15 plus 3 times 6 plus, and again, let's take a look here. Inside parentheses, we have addition and we have multiplication. Again, according to the order of operations, you do multiplication before addition. So this is going to be 6 plus 7 times 5, which is 35. Again, we're still working out what's in parentheses, but that said, we can simplify 15 over 15 to be 1 plus 3 times 6 plus 35 is going to be 41. Now we just have two operations left. We have addition here and multiplication here. As I just mentioned, you do multiplication before addition according to the order of operations. So I'm going to do 41 times 3 off to the side. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So this is 1 plus 123, which is 124. So the answer to this one is D, 124. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says, what is the reciprocal of 7? So in order to find the reciprocal of 7, the first thing I'm going to do is express 7 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Again, you could read all fractions as long division, so I could read this as 7 divided by 1. 7 divided by 1 is just 7. All right, now let's find the reciprocal of 7, which is the same thing as 7 over 1. All we do is flip-flop our numerator and denominator. In other words, the reciprocal of 7, which is the same thing as 7 over 1, is 1 over 7, or 1/7. So this one is C. The reciprocal of 7 is 1/7. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says, what is the value of x if 2/5 x minus 17 equals 15? So in other words, we're going to be solving the equation 2/5 x minus 17 equals 15 for x. In other words, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is add 17 to both sides of the equation. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving you at 2/5 x over here. If you can't do 15 plus 17 mentally, do it the old-fashioned way. 5 plus 7 is going to be 12. Carry a 1. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. All right, so we have 2/5 x equals 32. To get rid of this 2/5 in front of x, we're going to multiply it by its reciprocal, notably by 5 over 2. And of course, we have to do that to both sides of the equation. This crosses out here and here, leaving you with x over here. And let's go ahead and simplify 32 times 5 over 2 via some cross reduction. I could write 32 as a fraction by placing it over 1. And that enables me to say 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 32 16 times. This is 16 over 1. 16 divided by 1 is just 16, times 5 over 1. 5 divided by 1 is just 5. So our answer is going to be 16 times 5, which I'm going to do off to the side so as not to make any simple mistakes. 6 times 5 is 30, so bring down a 0, carry a 3. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 3 is 8. So the answer to this one is going to be A, 80. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PICAT says solve the inequality. We have negative 4y greater than or equal to 26 plus 6. Now, I will say this. Solving inequalities is just like solving equations. That said, there's one rule you really have to pay attention to. If you multiply or divide across the inequality sign by a negative value, that's going to prompt you to change the direction of the sign. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and solve this one. This becomes negative 4y is greater than or equal to 26 plus 6 is going to be 32. To get y by itself, we're going to divide both sides of this inequality by -4. In doing so, this crosses out. But what did I just do? I just divided across the inequality sign by a negative value. So that's going to prompt me to change the direction of its sign. So this is y is less than or equal to positive 32 divided by -4. Again, a positive divided by a negative is going to be negative, in this case, 8. So the answer to this one is y is less than or equal to -8, which you can see is answer choice B, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PyCat says factor x squared minus 11x plus 24. Again, on the Asvab and PyCat, you're not given a reference sheet or a calculator, so you want to get in the habit of copying things down on your own scratch paper as you prepare to take either of these tests. In this case, we're being asked to factor a quadratic equation where the leading coefficient in front of x squared is 1, which is why it's not expressed. And so if we can factor this one, it's going to look like this. X times x like so. Now, all we have to do is find two numbers that multiply to positive 24, but add to negative 11. Now, many of you could do this mentally, of course, but let's start listing out some factors of positive 24. Well, 6 times positive 4 is 24. That said, 6 plus 4 is 10, not negative 11, so we can't use these two. Well, what about negative 6 and negative 4? Negative 6 times negative 4 is in fact positive 24. A negative times a negative is a positive. That said, negative 6 plus negative 4 is negative 10, not negative 11. All right, so these aren't going to work. What about 8 and 3? 8 times 3 is 24. 8 plus 3 is positive 11, not negative 11. What about negative 8 and negative 3? Negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24 because a negative times a negative is a positive. And negative 8 plus negative 3 is in fact negative 11. So these are our two numbers, and all we have to do is do this, minus 8, minus 3. And just like that, we factored this one. This one is A. Now, if you quickly want to check your work, all you have to do is expand this via the FOIL method. That is to say, you're going to take x, you're going to multiply it here, and you're going to take negative 8, you're going to multiply it here and here, and this should match that which we were asked to factor. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Negative 8 times x is negative 8x. And negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. Let's simplify this by combining like terms. Negative 3x minus 8x is negative 11x plus 24. And as you can see, this is exactly what we were asked to factor, so we're confident that we did factor it correctly. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and PyCat says if x lies between 0 and 1, but does not equal 0 or 1, which of these is correct? So before we look at our answer choices, I'm actually going to write the solution myself. Again, the problem tells us x is between 0 and 1, but it does not equal 0 or 1. So this is what our solution is going to look like. In other words, we're going to solve all these inequalities for our answer choices and find which one matches the solution we just wrote. So let's start with A. A says 1 is less than x minus 1, which is less than 2. Again, to solve this inequality, we have to add 1 to both sides of the inequality. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with x here. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1, of course, is 3. This says x is between 2 and 3, so it is not correct. I'm going to skip to C to see what we get when we solve C. This is negative 1 is less than 2 minus x, which is less than 1. Again, we're solving for x, so the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 2 from both sides of the inequality. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with negative x in the middle. Negative 1 minus 2 is going to be negative 3. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Now we have negative x in the middle here. To make this just x, we're going to divide everything by negative 1, of course. Now the one rule you have to know regarding inequalities is this. Whenever you multiply or divide across an inequality sign by a negative value, that's going to prompt you to change the direction of the sign. So in this case, I divided across these inequality signs by a negative value of 1. That's going to prompt me to change the direction of the signs, and I'll go ahead and make that very obvious. Negative x divided by negative 1. Again, a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. Negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive 3. Negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive 1. So this says x is in between 1 and 3, which is not correct. So we know C is not correct. Let's go ahead and take a look at B. We have 1 less than x plus 1, which is less than 2. To solve this one, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x in the middle. 1 minus 1 is 0. 2 minus 1 is 1. This does, in fact, match our solution, so we know the correct answer to this one is B, and we do not have to check D, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and Piquet says, which of the following points lies on the line y equals 2x plus 3? And in order to determine that very quickly, I'm going to use an xy table, of course. And as it happens, all of our x values are given to us already. Again, ordered pairs come in the form x, y. So all of these in this column are x values. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in these x values accordingly, and that will tell us what y value corresponds with that x value for our equation of our line. So let's start by plugging in negative 5 for x. This becomes y equals 2 times negative 5 plus 3. Y equals, now you should be able to do this mentally. 2 times negative 5 is going to be negative 10. Negative 10 plus 3 is going to be negative 7. So the point negative 5, negative 7 is on the line. Negative 5, negative 8 is not on the line. Let's move on to x being negative 1. Again, we're going to be plugging this into our original equation. This becomes y equals 2 times negative 1 plus 3. And you should be able to do this part mentally. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, plus 3 is going to be positive 1. So the point negative 1, positive 1 is on the line. Negative 1, 5 is not on the line. Let's move on to x being 0. This says y equals 2 times 0 plus 3. This is y equals 3. So the point 0, 3 is on the line. 0, 6 is not on the line. And finally, we know D is correct. That said, let's just go ahead and work it out. We're going to let x be 3. So this becomes y equals 2 times 3 plus 3. Y equals 6 plus 3. Y equals 9. So the point 3, 9, written like this, is on the line. And we just confirm that D is the only point that is, in fact, on the line. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and Piquet says, if A and B are both points on a line, what is the midpoint of point A, 620, and point B, 1040? So the midpoint formula is down here, of course, if you need it, but this one's pretty easy to solve intuitively. X of M, that is the midpoint of X, and Y of M, that is the midpoint of Y, is going to be equal to X1 plus X2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Now, the only thing you have to do to solve this one really is identify x1, x2, y1, and y2 respectively. Again, this is going to be x1, this is going to be x2, this is going to be y1, this is going to be y2 respectively. So let's go ahead and plug those values in and solve accordingly. This becomes 6 plus 10 over 2. And then 20 plus 40 over 2. Let's go ahead and solve this. And I'm going to skip a step here. I'm going to work this out right here so it looks nice and neat. 6 plus 10 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 20 plus 40 is 60. 60 divided by 2 is 30. So the midpoint of point A and B is 830. And you can see that that is, in fact, answer choice C in this case. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and Piquet says, what is the largest whole number that can be divided into 12, 30, and 72 evenly? So I'm going to start by checking 6. What is 12 divided by 6? 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay, let me go ahead and check 30 now. 30 divided by 6 is going to be 5. And 72 divided by 6 is going to be 12. Again, this question is really testing your knowledge of your times tables and your ability to do mental math. So Since 6 goes into 12, 30, and 72 evenly, we know A and B are not correct answer choices. All right, let's go ahead and check 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1, so 12 goes into 12 evenly. 30 divided by 12. Well, 12 times 2 would be 24, and 12 times 3 would be 36. As it happens, 30 divided by 12 is 2.5. So as we can see, 12 does not go into 30 evenly. So we know the correct answer to this one is going to be C6. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and Piquet says solve for x by factoring. We have the equation x squared minus 13x plus 42 equals 0. We should recognize that this is a quadratic with a leading coefficient of 1. So if we can factor it, it's going to look like this: x times x in parentheses. Of course, this is going to equal 0. Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 42 but add to negative 13. If you can't do that mentally, you may have to work it out like this. Let's start with 6 and 7. 6 times 7 is in fact 42. 6 plus 7 is positive 13, so these aren't going to work. Let's check negative 6 and negative 7. Negative 6 times negative 7 is in fact positive 42. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. Negative 6 plus negative 7 is negative 13. So these are going to be our two factors. This becomes x minus 6, x minus 7. Of course, we're going to set these each equal to 0 independently to solve it. It becomes x minus 6 equals 0 and x minus 7 equals 0. These are one-step equations. Add 6 to both sides to get x by itself. In doing so, this crosses out. This becomes x equals 0 plus 6 or 6. Or add 7 to both sides to get x by itself. This crosses out. X equals 0 plus 7 or 7. So the answers to this one is x equals 6 or x equals 7, which is answer choice A, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the Asvab and Piquet says, what is the surface area of a box that is 6 inches wide, 12 inches long, and 9 inches tall? So just to make sure it's nice and clear, I'm going to write out these dimensions. Again, we have a length of 12 inches, a width of 6 inches, and a height of 9 inches. Now, since you're not permitted to use a reference sheet or a calculator on the actual Asvab or Piquet, you do have to commit these formulas to memory. Specifically for boxes, you have to know how to find the volume of a box as well as the surface area of a box. Now, finding surface area is very simple. We have 3 dimensions and a box has 6 faces. So to find its surface area, we're going to do 2. Again, there are 2 identical faces in a box. And then all we're going to do is make sure we multiply these 3 things together. So first I'm going to do length times width, plus, again, 2 faces, so 2 times length times height, plus 2. And finally, we have width times height. All right, so that